Hi, I'm Chuck Chvala, former Senate Majority Leader,
And I'm Scott Jensen, former Assembly Speaker.
and we're the insiders. Scott, so where's the GOP at after Trump, especially in the state of Wisconsin? What happens to Wisconsin Republicans, or how do they react to the post-Trump era?
Well, there's no doubt that President Trump changed the Republican Party in Wisconsin. The Republican Party now is stronger in rural areas and a little bit weaker in some of the suburbs than it has been in the past. The party is also much more now a party of the working class rather than the professional class. That's a change that's the result of President Trump as well. I think, though, in Wisconsin, we have a long tradition on the Republican side that while our establishment wing and our outsiders or insurgent wing might fight each other pretty aggressively in the primaries, they do come together in the general election. So we saw that even during the Tea Party days, and we saw it during Trump, that there was just a great deal of unanimity on the Republican side. And that's how they were able to dominate the legislative races and to make statewide races competitive again here in Wisconsin. So I think we'll continue to see that trend here where the Republican Party of the state probably becomes a little more rural, a little less suburban, that we're and that everybody, both the insurgent wing and the establishment wing, come together after the primary, even though they might rough each other up a little bit during the primaries.
Obviously, I am not an insider on the Republicans and what happens here, but I do have questions as a person who looks at politics closely. For example, is the Republican Party going to have to jettison people who clearly aren't on a fact basis? QAnon is a really extreme example, and they did not reject the Congresswoman, not in the state of Wisconsin, but will Wisconsin Republicans have to reject that? Reject people who say the election was a fraud and you can't trust them and stop the steal? Will the party have to reject that? And the other thing is, will the party be able to sustain what has been an absolute devotion at its core to taking care of the richest of the rich when rural, really lower middle income, working class people are at the core of what the party's base is in rural Wisconsin? Is the party going to be able to sustain that kind of dissonance in its economic policies at the same time trying to reject the crazy wing of the party, for lack of a better term? Are those things going to happen, or will the party just kind of, say, don't pay attention to this problem over in the corner of QAnon and stop the steal, and we're just going to move on? How does the party navigate that?
I think the Democrats help us with a lot of that. I think the progressive wing of the Democratic Party comes across to lots of rural Wisconsin as condescending. And that helps immensely in getting rural voters who have traditional conservative values on social issues in particular and cultural issues. They just can't stand being lectured to by folks from Dane County or Hollywood or Washington, D.C. That helps us immensely in holding that area of the state. Where we have to do work is we have to stop the slide in the suburbs, where I think you can argue that President Trump's communication style caused him and the Republican Party trouble in the traditionally vote-rich Republican suburbs here around in southeastern Wisconsin. We've got to figure out a way to get those back. I'm hoping that can be fixed. When we did polling, many of those voters who decided in the end not to stick with the president still said they thought he did a good job on the issues. So they were okay with the issues. They just couldn't take the guy's style. And so I'm hoping that somewhere we can find a way to build up our support in the suburbs and retain the support we now have in the rural areas of the state.
But you didn't answer the fundamental question, which I think is the problem that you're going to have with holding the suburbs. And that is, if the party remains unwilling to reject QAnon and reject people who say the elections are not legitimate, those people in the suburbs, they understand the fundamental of democracy is to accept elections and to go through a peaceful transition of power. You can't get those people back, can you?
I think that's a problem at the
rejecting?
national level, but I just don't see that problem really here at the state level and state politics. Now, mind you, a lot of people get their impression of the two parties from what happens on the national stage.
But Ron Johnson is an example of it right here in Wisconsin, and he's doubling down on it. He's throwing extra logs on the fire. So it'll be really interesting to see with Ron Johnson at the top of the ticket for Republicans in next year, whether that is something that can be sustained. And I think the Republican Party, or at least our country, and I think the Republican Party will have to come to a reckoning about recognizing that QAnon and saying legitimate elections are legitimate. That has to stop. And I hope that the Republican Party fixes it because it's on their side. That's not a problem on both parties. That's a problem that's on you guys. You got to deal with it somehow. Don't you think?
Well, one thing I would point out is Ron Johnson, both times he ran, outperformed the top of the ticket in the Republican suburbs. So he did outperform President Trump in the suburbs in 2016, and I think he will do so again in 2022 if he's on the ballot.
He's got some more stuff on his resume this time, but we'll see. See you next time.